Single dad's touching dance request for CEO's paralyzed daughter reveals an amazing truth that changes everything. Richard wiped his hands on a rag, the scent of grease clinging to his skin as he looked out the garage window. It was early evening, and the sun dipped behind the distant hills of their small town, casting long shadows. A familiar ache settled in his chest. He missed Emily's laughter. The sound of it ringing through the house had been a light in his dark days since her mother's passing. But now, it felt distant, overshadowed by worries about prom night. His heart raced at the thought of it. His spirited daughter, now paralyzed from the waist down, was aching for the same experiences he cherished as a kid. He could already envision her bright eyes filled with excitement, yet that was coupled with his heart's dread that life's unfairness might rob her of this rite of passage. In that twist of fate, Richard learned about a charity gala hosted by Karen, the CEO of the town's largest tech company, aimed at supporting disability initiatives. The luxurious event would celebrate inclusivity, but Richard's mind swirled with doubts. He hesitated. Would Karen and the well-heeled guests even notice Emily, let alone recognize her strength? The thought gnawed at him. They were worlds apart, and the thought of marching into that glittering world with nothing but grease-stained hands seemed absurd, almost foolish. He wanted to reach out to Karen, but he couldn't shake the voice in his head that questioned his right to ask. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With a deep breath, he picked up the phone. The conversation with Karen revealed connections between their families, a childhood shared between their mothers, struggles they both had faced. But as they spoke, Richard felt a fraying anxiety knot in his stomach. Would this revelation shift their dynamic, or was he building a bridge to a chasm of discomfort? The warmth of her voice enveloped him, yet he was painfully aware of the gulf that separated them. The executive's world of polished suits and social niceties was light years away from his greasy jeans and tired hands. As he and Emily prepared for the gala, Richard wrestled with gnawing insecurities. The weight of disapproving glances from the elite felt suffocating. Each stifled breath screamed a fear that acceptance would remain out of reach. What if they viewed them as charity cases, not as the fierce individuals they had fought to become? Just that morning, Emily had beamed at the thought of dancing, but with each passing hour, Richard's stomach twisted in anxiety. He reminded himself this would be a moment that showcased Emily's fierce spirit. But with that thought came an all-encompassing dread that would linger in the shadows of the glimmering gala. As the first note of music pulsed through the crowd, Richard felt the electric tension course through him. Yet, just then, he noticed a figure standing at the edge of the gala, the familiar outline of someone who could unravel everything he had tried to bury. His heart stuttered as recognition washed over him. Would tonight unveil secrets that could change the course of their lives forever? Richard's pulse thudded in his ears as he tried to focus on the swirling crowd around him, yet all he could think about was the person who had captured his attention. The figure stood still, almost a specter against the vibrant chaos of the gala, hearts dancing and laughter merging into a symphony of opulence. That presence was unmistakably familiar. It was Kelly, his estranged sister. Emotion rolled over him in waves: anger, hurt, longing. They hadn't spoken in years. Their last encounter had ended in a shouting match, fueled by buried resentments that had festered since their childhood. Each memory crashed over him. Times they laughed, times they clashed. This was not the reunion he hoped for, not here, not now. Emily's excitement drew his attention back. She stood before a collective of curious gazes, her wheelchair gracing the polished floor, her dress shimmering under the elegantly placed lights. Richard felt a surge of pride displace his apprehension momentarily. His daughter was here, showcasing her strength despite the challenges that life had lumped upon her. But then his internal conflict emerged. How could he fully embrace her moment while torn between the satisfaction of seeing Emily shine and the emotional upheaval that Kelly's presence provoked? he could feel the tension mounting as Emily caught sight of him. There was an innocence in her eyes, full of hope, searching for her father's encouragement. He took a steadying breath. This was Emily's night. It was time to bury his own demons, at least for a few hours, and be the father she needed. He approached her, a smile plastered across his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ready for some fun?" he asked, trying to sound more upbeat than he felt. "Let us dance, Dad," she responded, her voice laced with pure enthusiasm. As they swayed to the music, Richard felt a mix of honor and guilt. He was kissing a piece of normalcy that had been elusive since the accident. Their movements were tentative at first, but as the tune enveloped them, Richard tapped into the joys of the moment, cherishing every beat that passed. He braved the upward glances around him, avoiding judgment, focusing fully on Emily. But just as the atmosphere began to feel empowering, the flashing lights caught Kelly again, turning her face into a mosaic of emotions: doubt, regret, and perhaps a hint of longing. For that split second, Richard felt emotionally paralyzed himself. Did she come to relive old wounds, or was she seeking reconciliation? The song ended, but the dance floor was crowded, creating a barrier too thick for any meaningful exchange. His instinct urged him to confront the complications head-on. He wanted to know why she was here, wanted to know if she felt the tumult of their shared history echoing in their present. As they stepped off the dance floor, Richard noticed Karen surveying the room, scanning the crowd with a purpose that hinted she might bridge the gap between him and his sister. Could she be the catalyst for a confrontation he both dreaded and secretly yearned for? In that moment, Richard faced a decision that would shape not only this evening, but possibly their futures. Moments of reconciliation could fade like his self-doubt had begun to do on the dance floor. But would the strength he felt for Emily be enough to face Kelly? Just then, he caught Emily's gaze as she smiled, her spirit infectious and vibrant, drawing inspiration and resolve from her. The point of no return beckoned. Would he remain in the shadows of his fear or step forward into the fray? The weight of uncertainty hung heavily, forcing him to take a step closer towards the unexpected truth awaiting him. With Emily's light radiating through the murkiness of his emotions, Richard made a choice. He had to confront the past, not just for his own sake, but for the sake of his daughter. The decision simmered within him, spurring him forward, past a throng of fascinated onlookers. As they glided through the crowd, he silently wished to embrace that moment of connection he had always yearned for, both with his daughter and his sister. He spotted Karen again, who seemed as if she were scanning the crowd for an anchor. Richard approached her, a sense of determination weaving through his anxiety. "Do you think it's time?" he asked, his voice barely steady. Karen turned her attention to him, reading the unspoken concerns etched across his features. "Only you can decide, Richard. But don't let fear hold you back from what could be a chance at healing." Her words settled deep in his mind, echoing truths he had long accepted yet seldom acted upon. Richard had been allowing fear to dictate his actions for years, choosing avoidance over confrontation, stagnation over growth. The stark reality of that realization cut through him. His professional life had been built on decisive actions, yet in his personal life, he allowed himself to tread carefully, tiptoeing around painful memories. "Let me do this," he said, resolutely pushing past his reservations. Empowered by Emily's earlier exuberance, he took a steadying breath, adjusting his stance as a new wave of bravery surged within him. He caught Kelly's gaze once more, but this time, instead of recoiling, he took firm steps toward her. The vivid sequin of her gown shimmered as she turned, catching sight of him with a startled expression. "Kelly," he said, voice steady yet vulnerable. "We need to talk." Her eyes flickered with hesitation, but then something softened in her expression, reminiscent of the bygone years when they had shared sandwich-making duties in the kitchen, laughing over mustard spills and crinkled papers. "I didn't think you'd want to." "I didn't want to, not for a long time," Richard admitted, feeling the weight of that truth lift, creating space for sincerity. "But I can't ignore you anymore, especially not tonight." A montage of their unresolved conflicts played through his mind, blame darting, accusations thrown like arrows. But now, the sight of Emily laughing nearby painted a different picture. The thought of his daughter's future without hesitation or guilt pushed him onward. She deserved a family that was intact, despite its fractures. He's done beautifully tonight, hasn't he? Kelly gestured toward Emily, her voice tinged with unguarded admiration. Richard nodded, directly meeting her eyes. She's a force. And I want to be a father she can count on, and that means facing what's left unsaid between us. Kelly's brow furrowed. Richard could feel the tension threatening to coalesce again. Yet something flickered in her eyes, maybe hope or remorse, it was hard to tell. It's not easy to forget the past. I don't want to forget it, he countered, the heat of urgency guiding his words. I want us to move beyond it. As a tense silence enveloped them, Richard could sense the crowd swirling around them. He was acutely aware of the stakes. Part of him wanted to revert to noise and distraction, but instead, he pressed on, feeling the pressure of the moment solidify his resolve. I'm here, Kelly. I'm here and I want to be a brother again. To his surprise, a flicker of vulnerability sparked in Kelly's expression. But before she could respond, Emily wheeled her way to them, her cheerful energy disrupting the impending confrontation. Dad, look! They're serving dessert! She exclaimed, blissfully unaware of the charged tension at the precipice of resolution. Richard's heart sank fleetingly, yet he found solace in Emily's exuberance. We should get you something sweet, he replied, torn between his instincts to engage Kelly further and to provide Emily joy in the moment, but as he glanced back, he could see the stir of emotions reflected in Kelly's eyes, the unresolved tension waiting just beneath the surface. This had all the makings of a turning point, but what weight would it carry? What if this was merely the ascendancy of deeper problems that were waiting to unravel? In that moment, Richard's pulse quickened again, not with fear, but with the pressure of transformation and impending choices. The dialogue he once thought pivotal might not be the end of this chapter, but just a prelude. Would he let the moment drift into the sweet noise of celebration, or would he dare to confront what lay buried within them? A burning resolve flickered as he turned toward Emily, but his gaze remained fixated on Kelly. Both women held pieces of his heart he was struggling to mend. As he made the choice where to focus his attention next, he could feel the equilibrium shift, a new chapter waiting to be written in their fragile family narrative. Richard watched Emily's jubilant form dart toward the dessert table, each of her movements bursting with the unrestrained energy of childhood. It was a sight that, for a moment, enveloped him in a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold tension lingering in his interaction with Kelly. Yet, that warmth quickly dimmed as he shifted his focus back to his sister, aware that unresolved issues loomed between them, capable of destabilizing everything he hoped to rebuild. Let's just get her dessert. It'll make her happy, he suggested, his voice strained as he felt familiar doubts creeping back in. Kelly's expression held a hint of disappointment, but she didn't push back. Instead, she nodded, and they began to walk toward Emily. The sweetness of the dessert was not lost on Richard, but the bitter taste of unspoken words clung stubbornly to his thoughts. His instinct to protect Emily by avoiding the confrontation felt like a double-edged sword, cutting away the chance for healing in the long run. As they approached the table, Emily threw her hands in the air, exclaiming, "Look, they have chocolate mousse." The way she lit up over the simple pleasure seemed to radiate into Richard, illuminating the dark corners of his thoughts as he aimed to savor that moment. Yet, a miniature war raged inside him, igniting an urgency to seize the opportunity before it slipped away like grains of sand. "Emily, why don't you tell Aunt Kelly how much you've enjoyed tonight?" Richard suggested, urging her forward with the slightest nudge. His daughter beamed and grabbed Kelly's hand, prompting a faint smile to break the heaviness that hung in the air. As Emily launched into a light-hearted account of her favorite parts of the evening, Richard felt a surge of gratitude. Here was the essence of transformation, nestled in the laughter swirling around them, one that beckoned him to confront his fears for her sake. Richard's gaze met Kelly's across the table as Emily began to lose herself in the joy of the moment. "We do need to talk," he said, firming his resolve as Emily took a step back to admire her dessert. Kelly's brow twitched in acknowledgement. The underlying currents between them shifted perceptibly. Richard noted the sharpness in her posture that mirrored his own anxiety. "I can't just pretend everything's fine while I ignore the past," Or while you do, he added, his voice carrying an insistent whisper over the cacophony around them. Maybe pretending was simpler, Kelly replied, her voice low, glancing at where Emily stood. Richard clasped his hands together, grounding himself against the swell of emotions that roared in him. But did it make us happier? His question, straightforward yet imbued with tenacity, hung in the air like ripe fruit, waiting to be picked or cast aside. Kelly's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, her guarded expression melted away, revealing a nuanced vulnerability. I remember the laughter, but I also remember the pain. Can we really come back from that? We can try, Richard said, sensing his own heart race at the idea of risk. For Emily. We owe her that much. In that moment, he could almost feel the weight of their shared history lifting. He was recognizing the strength required to face discomfort, realizing that their sisterly bond could be an anchor rather than a shackle. Emily, oblivious to the tension, flashed her impish smile, holding out her mousse as if it held a secret, making Richard chuckle despite the seriousness of the conversation. The contrasting moments, the light and the heavy, tangled together in their family dynamic, harmonizing in ways Richard had barely begun to appreciate. As he turned to Kelly, an opportunity shimmered in the dim light. Let us schedule a time to really talk, just the two of us, he suggested, a fresh determination coursing through him. It doesn't have to be right now, but I want to make sure we do it. All right, she acquiesced after a moment's hesitation, her voice softened. But Richard could see the lingering doubt in her eyes, the unacknowledged weight of what they were stepping into. Would it be enough to truly move forward? As they prepared to join Emily, Richard challenged his own fears, ready to steer the conversation back to the uncomfortable truths they had both avoided for far too long. The foundations of healing were fragile, and while he felt emboldened by his intention, uncertainty still shadowed his resolve. With every step, Richard realized he was entering the depths of a journey not just marked by confrontation, but by the exploration of who they could become as a family. As they approached Emily, who was now painstakingly constructing a parfait with whipped cream and chocolate shavings, Richard knew the real battle lay ahead. Would they reclaim the pieces of their fractured relationship, or would the past still have its hold over them? Determined or not, a new weight pressed on him. The moment of truth was lurking just beyond their tentative commitments, and soon, he would have to face the deepest fears that lingered beneath the surface. But would they emerge stronger, or would the burden of history shadow their new beginnings? Richard's mind swirled with a mix of anxiety and hope as he watched Emily work with the mousse, her small hands carefully layering each ingredient. The way she approached dessert making mirrored his own desire to layer and reconstruct the fractured history he shared with Kelly. Every swirl of cream felt reminiscent of the whirls of emotion he needed to navigate. He wasn't just an observer of his daughter's joy, he was her architect, aiming to construct a new reality built on transparency and growth. Look at this! Emily exclaimed, holding up her parfait triumph, her delight infectious. Richard fought to suppress the encroaching shadows of doubt that sought to undermine the warmth of the moment. How often had he pushed aside his own happiness, thinking it best to sidestep the discomfort? With a newfound clarity, he realized it was time to stop avoiding difficult conversations, if only to give Emily the stability she deserved. That's amazing, Em. He cheered, forcing an exuberant tone that pushed against the weight of their family's history. Kelly's gaze lingered on Emily as well, admiration softening the tension etched into her features. Even if the three of them stood within the prison of their past grievances, they were also capable of sharing light, yet darkness loomed and Richard could feel it. What had once been so simplistic, family dynamics, relationships, and even the notion of forgiveness now twisted into something nearly unbearable. They occupied the same space physically, but the emotional gulf felt insurmountable. As Emily took her first slurp of her treat, Richard shifted his focus towards Kelly. There was no use waiting for the right moment, it was time to bring forth what had long been silenced. I really want us to work through our issues, he started, timing his words like a meticulous surgeon. Not just for us, but for Emily too. Kelly's tight posture hinted at her reluctance, but as she opened her mouth to respond, Richard pressed on, we can't keep pretending. Not after everything that happened. We owe it to her to be honest, to show her how to navigate difficult conversations. Easy for you to say, Kelly muttered, her gaze dropping to the table, devoid of the strength it had held moments ago. Some scars don't just fade away. That's true, he replied, the weight of her words reverberating in his mind. But if hiding our pain keeps us from living and thriving, what are we really teaching her? Silence enveloped them. Richard could almost hear the gears turning in Kelly's mind. She needed a push, but without the antagonism that had characterized their relationship. He was attempting to be a bridge rather than a battleground, but the possibility that she might reject his overture echoed painfully in his chest. Richard, talking about the past might open wounds that never quite healed, she finally articulated, her voice laced with sorrow. Yet there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes, a desire to confront it, a need for closure. I know, he admitted, slotting that acknowledgement between their shared fears. But it's about uncovering what's under the surface. Every layer we peel back brings clarity, offers perspective. It's time we sort out what we've been carrying. A fleeting look of understanding crossed her face, and for a brief moment, Richard could see the sister he'd once known behind the walls they had built. The realization struck him, perhaps it was not just Emily who needed to feel strong, he had a role to play in that nurturing too. With this confrontation looming over them, Richard took a deep breath. As they prepared to break the silence that had long restrained them, a question pressed against his resolve. If confronting the past was the only way to secure a future for Emily, how many more truths lay buried beneath layers of shared history? As they prepared to speak, doubts warred with newfound hope. Richard felt a flicker of determination swell in his chest as he wondered, was he ready to excavate his greatest fears for the possibility of rebuilding their family? With Emily standing by, innocent to the complexities, his heart raced as he summoned the courage to unveil scars long hidden, a decision that could redefine their family forever. Richard sat at the dining table, heart pounding and pulse racing, as the moment stretched toward its inevitable confrontation. He sensed the weight of the unspoken truths thickening the air around them. Every breath felt laborious as he pushed through the quagmire of his thoughts. He thought of Emily, her wide eyes bright with hope, and the expectations riding on him to navigate this fragile space. Why don't we start by sharing our memories of better times? He proposed, the words almost tumbling out in a rush. As if suggesting a game could soften the gravity of the situation, he tried to channel something light-hearted, but he knew all too well that this was a picnic, it was the battlefield of emotions. Kelly raised an eyebrow, skepticism flickering across her face like a dying ember. What good is discussing the past if we can't even agree on the present? Her tone carried that familiar sharp edge, yet beneath it lay a fragile openness, a door slightly ajar that he could either push through or let swing closed. If the past still matters, perhaps it's time we redefine it, he replied, grappling for a balance between challenge and invitation. He remembered their childhood barefoot runs through the sprinklers, laughter echoing in winter's cold. Those moments felt distant yet tangible, like fragments of a shattered mirror reflecting who they used to be. Kelly was silent for a moment, likely dredging up her own memories, the good mingling reluctantly with the complex emotions of their shared history. Richard's desperation for her to engage ignited a deep-seated urge to bridge the gaps, to remind them both of their connection amid the chasms of hurt. As he looked at Emily now, such carefree joy radiating from her essence, he questioned whether their family could resemble the way it once had. Was it too late for reconciliation? He was no stranger to tension, he felt it so acutely that it wrapped itself around him, like vines slowly tightening their grip. It was a familiar chokehold, one rooted in regret and fear of the unknown. Richard, the past is a ghost that one keep quiet, Kelly eventually said, her voice softening but still resolute. Every time we touch it, it bleeds. Each word hit him squarely in the chest. He longed to refute her, to promise her that healing was more powerful than pain, that understanding could supersede frailty. But instead, he paused. This was not a debate, it was a dialogue waiting to happen. He needed her to realize that their willingness to confront these issues was a gift for Emily more than anything else. Maybe, but we can choose what stays and what goes, he countered, finding grounding in her vulnerability, a flicker of hope ignited within him. It is not about erasing the pain, but rather acknowledging that it exists and learning to live with it so that we can be present for Emily. This statement lingered in the air, highlighted by the murmur of the uneaten dessert on the table. Richard's heart raced, awaiting her response. He could see the hesitant spark of acceptance in Kelly's expression, doubtful yet curious, pushing against the confines of hurt in search of something that resembled healing. "Do you really think we can do that?" she asked, her voice unreadable yet seeking something beyond the surface. That he leaned forward, vulnerability opening like a flower in the morning sun. "I believe it starts here, right in this messy moment." As they collided with raw honesty, he felt the emotional contours of their family shifting. But doubt lingered, sharpening the edges of his joy. Could they truly dismantle the protective walls they had erected over the years? The moment was ripe with possibility, but he knew one misstep could send them spiraling back to their previous silence. "Start with a memory, Richard," Kelly prompted, her eyes kindling with cautious interest. And in that moment, Richard realized the journey to healing was not merely a retrieval of memories but an intricate reweaving of their shared narrative, a task that could redefine who they were. Just as he opened his mouth to share, a sudden tense creak from the stairs interrupted them. Richard's heart dropped. The moment felt abruptly delicate, poised like a crystal teetering at the edge of a table. Who had come into their fragile sanctuary now? The door swung open, and with it came a question more significant than any memory. Would they have the strength to confront not just their past, but the future unfolding beyond it? Richard turned his head slowly, the light from the nearby window catching the familiar silhouette of his daughter at the top of the staircase. Emily, with her bright expression, was still clinging to remnants of childhood innocence. The tension seeped into his bones, intensifying with every second she lingered there, unsure. "Hey, Em," he greeted, his voice softer now, mindful of the delicate emotional landscape he'd been navigating with Kelly moments before. He felt his heart wrestle between the protective instinct of a father and the vulnerable man seeking connection with a woman he'd once known so well. "Daddy. Can I come down?" She bounded down 2 steps at a time, an embodiment of hope in motion. That simple phrase warmed Richard's heart, its potential overshadowing the previous conversation. "Of course, sweetheart. We're just talking," he reassured, watching her approach with a lightness that belied her usual concerns about their family dynamics. She was a tangible thread tethering him to joy, pulling him back from the precipice of doubt. As Emily reached the bottom of the stairs, her attention shifted, quick and curious. "Are you and Mom fighting again?" Richard met Kelly's eyes for a brief moment, and they exchanged a knowing glance, a silent acknowledgement of their past disagreements, but also a commitment to foster something better for Emily. Richard couldn't allow their struggles to shape her perception of family. "No, honey," he answered, forcing a smile. "We're just having a deep conversation. You know how adults can get sometimes." Emily paused, her little brows scrunching together, as if attempting to navigate the complexities of their world that frequently eluded her. She was wiser than her years suggested, perceptive to the tensions that permeated their household. "Okay," she finally replied, her voice brightening as she climbed onto Richard's lap. "Can we play a game later?" Richard couldn't deny the warmth saturating that request. Despite the weight he sensed hanging in the air, a small part of him relished the opportunity to be the father she deserved. "Absolutely. We can even mix in some of those old memories I was talking about with Mom. How does that sound?" he offered, heartened by the way her face illuminated. Emily giggled. "Let's play the one with the superheroes," she declared, her excitement infectious. Richard grinned, but beneath that joy, another layer of complexity stirred. How did they give her a family that was both functional and loving when his relationship with Kelly felt so fragile? It was a question nagging at him, a riddle he needed to solve, not just for himself but for Emily's sake. "Your mom and I are working on being better, Em," he ventured, his voice barely above a whisper, but loud enough for Kelly to hear. He needed Emily to understand that peace didn't always mean perfection. "Really? That's good. I want us to be happy together," she said, wisdom laced through the simplicity of her words. Richard quietly observed Kelly, noticing how her expression shifted as she processed Emily's innocence, her vulnerability. In those moments, he saw a glimmer of the woman he had once loved, the mother seeking connection and reconciliation. As he looked back at Emily, inspiration lit up his chest. If they were to untangle their familial web, it had to begin with both of them stepping into the light, dragging their past shadows into clarity. The moments they shared now mattered, combining the past with present intentions, but even as he embraced this newfound resolve, doubt simulated an echo, ghosting through his mind. Would their effort to dig deeper heal or fracture the already tentativeness of their family? Let us be superheroes together. Ready? He declared, rallying around Emily's enthusiasm, even as the very air was thick with unsaid feelings between him and Kelly. The playful exchange ignited, but underneath it all loomed the larger question: would they have the resolve to confront not only their past but also the vulnerability of their future, one carefully crafted moment at a time? And just as laughter erupted between father and daughter, Richard felt the stirrings of determination brewing inside. He wasn't just fighting for reconciliation but also for his own sense of purpose, a notion of strength in the face of adversity. Richard, Kelly spoke again, her tone more serious now. The air had shifted, he sensed it before she even spoke the question. What are we going to do about our roles in all of this? As that uncertainty swirled in him, beckoning progress, Richard focused on Emily's laughter, caught somewhere between longing and hope, deciding to illuminate the truth that lay ahead. And as they took their playful moments, the shadows of what was and what could be loomed large, just waiting for them to confront them, in this fragile dance of parenthood and connection. Richard's heart was still dancing with Emily's laughter as Kelly's serious tone lingered in the air, a reminder of the unresolved tensions just beneath the surface. He had hoped the laughter would provide a shield, a momentary escape, but the weight of their circumstances loomed larger than ever. He glanced at Kelly, her brow furrowed with concern, and the protective instincts mingled with a pang of sorrow for what had once been. The authenticity of their shared laughter echoed, reminding him how easily they could slip into a rhythm of connection. Yet it highlighted the obstacles they faced, a haunting contrast that was all too real. Roles? He repeated, a probing question on his lips, even as he braced himself for the forthcoming conversation. Richard understood that addressing their roles was pivotal. They couldn't merely play the part of a family, they needed to become one. Yes, Kelly replied, her voice steady but edged with resolve. We have to figure out how we want to parent Emily. What does being a co-parent look like for us moving forward? Richard sat back, silently grappling with the complexities of that question. It felt as daunting as climbing a mountain without a roadmap. With Emily absorbing every tension between them, it became paramount. I think we both know that pretending everything is fine isn't going to work, he finally said, consciously choosing his words. This was no longer the time for half-truths, they needed to trample the fear that had elongated the rift between them. Agreed. But we also can't keep bumping heads over who's right or wrong, Kelly chimed in. Was it possible she too realized the toll of their discord on Emily? The way she conveyed this sentiment was a flicker of hope amidst a storm of uncertainties. Richard noticed a shift in his own resolve, a burden lifting. It was time to breathe life not just into their discussion but into the potential of what could be. What if we set a framework? A way to communicate about our responsibilities and maybe even acknowledge our own needs? He felt a rush of empowerment surge through him. Perhaps they could break through the stagnation. Kelly's eyes narrowed slightly as if considering the potential of his idea. That could work, but it'll require honesty, from both of us. The kind we've avoided. Right, Richard acknowledged. And it means showing vulnerability. That's tough. Yes, she sighed, looking away momentarily, as though the gravity of their situation pulled her thoughts elsewhere. Richard understood. It wasn't easy to dig into old wounds, especially when the scars had barely begun to heal, but amid the discomfort, he felt the looming presence of opportunity, the chance to reshape their family dynamic, to become agents of change instead of remnants of disappointment. Maybe we could even plan some family activities where we can share the load and expectations, he suggested, heart racing with a sense of urgency. Start slowly but intentionally. Activities like what? she asked, challenging him to dig deeper. Well, we could start with something simple. How about weekly game nights like we used to? But also, let Emily help plan, encourage her to participate. He was gaining momentum now, feeling the need for action rather than just conversation. Kelly's expression softened slightly, a crack forming in the wall of reticence. That could actually help her see us as united. And it gives us space to figure out our own dynamics without the pressure of immediate conflict. A tangible shift settled in the room. For the first time in quite a while, Richard felt optimism bloom. But just as Emily's joyful giggles had filled the air moments before, a sinister undercurrent of doubt returned. What if this new direction crumbled under the weight of their history? Would they follow through when the going got tough? Okay, he said, resolving to take the first step into uncharted territory. Let us try it. For Emily. As they navigated their agreement, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges they hadn't yet faced. Emily's voice chimed in, a bright note piercing through the tension. The little girl clambered off his lap, excitement radiating from her small figure. Can we play that superhero game now? We've got a mission, Em, he said, sharing a conspiratorial smile with Kelly, the initial spark of connection igniting with purpose. As they settled back into play and laughter, he felt himself falter momentarily, filled with a lingering doubt about whether they could sustain this newfound path. But then, the sounds of Emily's laughter drew him back, a reminder of the stakes and the reasons behind their efforts. There was no going back, only the chance to become better together, yet, as laughter mingled with uncertainty, a question tugged at Richard's mind: could they truly transform the narrative of their family, harnessing the past to build a new foundation, or would the old patterns emerge once again, threatening to unravel the delicate fabric they were attempting to weave anew? The moment loomed large and, beneath that veneer of levity, the truth of their journey began to swirl, eager to be unveiled. Richard awoke the next morning, the echoes of laughter and the warmth of connection still fresh in his mind. The new agreements with Kelly felt like fragile threads woven into a delicate tapestry, awaiting a steady hand to hold them in place. As he sipped his coffee, he contemplated the path ahead, mentally bracing himself for the challenges the day would unfold. Finding clarity in the quiet, he took out a notebook he'd used during his college days, its pages now empty except for a few scattered notes. He flipped to a blank page and began to write down his thoughts. Ideas for family activity nights filled his mind, alongside reminders of the roles he would need to embrace. This was more than just about games, it was about building empathy, communication, and trust. The blank page began to transform into a canvas for his aspirations, yet, just as he began to feel a surge of enthusiasm, he caught a glimpse of himself in the window, his reflection marred by the anxiety pulling at his core. What did he really know about being a co-parent? He had always skimmed the surface, afraid of diving too deeply out of fear of what he might discover. Today, the thought of confronting his uncertainties loomed large. Struggling against these pressing doubts, he decided the best way to engage with his fears was to prepare for his conversation with Kelly. Perhaps if they could both confront their uncertainties together, it would lay a stronger foundation for the co-parenting effort they were embarking upon. He envisioned asking her how she felt, what her hopes were, and most importantly, what fears she carried. Their vulnerability might prove to be a key component toward success. Later that day, Richard arrived home early, his pulse quickening as Emily bounded toward him, giggling and radiant. It was impossible not to smile back at her. As she asked about their game night plans, he felt that flicker of joy return. "Oh, we've got some cool ideas," he exclaimed, determined to radiate the confidence he hoped to cultivate within. When Kelly arrived, Richard observed the way she engaged with Emily, her laughter relaxed but laced with an undertone of restraint. He wondered if she felt as torn as he did, a protective layer shielding vulnerabilities that would take time to peel away. He needed to find the right moment to delve deeper, but how do you ask someone to let down their guard when you were both struggling to step out of the shadows? After dinner, while Emily was busy perusing game options, each one an opportunity to shape their newfound dynamic, Richard took a deep breath and turned to Kelly. "Can we chat for a minute?" Her brow furrowed slightly as she regarded him, but she nodded, her expression cautious as she followed him into the quieter living room. Kelly, I know we're trying to create something new for Emily, but I think we also need to talk about how we feel about all of this. If we're going to work together, we need to know what's steering us. What are you most afraid of? His voice carried a vulnerability that surprised even him. Laying it bare felt both exhilarating and terrifying. She cast a glance toward Emily, ensuring the little girl was wholly absorbed in her game, then turned back to Richard. Honestly, I'm afraid of letting Emily down. It's hard for me to believe we can make any of this work, especially after everything that has happened. Richard felt the knot in his chest tighten. Her honesty cut deep, but he recognized the reflection of his own fears echoed in her words. Could he truly rise to meet her expectations? I share that fear, but I think we owe it to her and ourselves to find a way, he said, the determination in his voice sculpting a bone-deep resolve. As they exchanged vulnerable thoughts, a tether formed between them, tentative but promising. They quickly realized that acknowledging their fears was the first step in fortifying their resolve. Just as Richard thought they were carving out new ground, the moment shifted, caught off guard by an unexpected knock at their door. The sound reverberated through the house, a stark reminder that the outside world was always waiting to crash the party they were trying to hold. Who could that be? Kelly wondered aloud, her expression morphing into one of concern. Richard, heartsick for a distraction but equally concerned about what's waiting outside, steeled himself. I'll check, he said, feeling the weight of uncertainty's return coil tightly around his heart. As he headed to the door, questions spiraled in his mind. Would this new development disrupt the fragile bridge they were building? Or would it provide the catalyst they needed to confront what lay ahead together? With trepidation, he opened the door, preparing himself for whatever awaited them on the other side. Richard's heart raced as the door swung open, revealing Karen, the vibrant CEO who had invited them to the gala. The last time their paths had crossed, their connection felt more like a fleeting encounter than a meaningful exchange. But now, here she stood, radiating purpose. Richard! She exclaimed, her enthusiasm palpable. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I thought it was time to check on how you and Emily are adjusting. Richard stepped aside, inviting her in. We're good, thank you, Karen. Just working on some family stuff. He struggled to mask his apprehension beneath a facade of grins, but he was aware that he was teetering on the brink of something pivotal. Family stuff? Sounds important, Karen noted, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. If there's any way I can help, feel free to reach out. After all, you were brave enough to show up at the gala. That speaks volumes about both you and Emily. Her words resonated with Richard, reinforcing a sense of accomplishment he'd yet to fully embrace. He had taken a critical step at the gala, for himself, Emily, and, indeed, for his relationship with Kelly. He directed her attention toward the living room, where Kelly and Emily sat curiously engaged in their game selection. As Karen entered, Emily's face lit up. Aunt Karen. Want to play with us? She eagerly asked, her sheer enthusiasm permeating the room. Richard glanced over at Kelly, who seemed to soften at the invitation, her initial stress momentarily pivoting towards warmth. Of course. What game are we playing? Karen asked, kneeling beside Emily, her vibrant smile always ready to embrace moments of joy. Richard stood by, attuned to the gentle dynamics of their evolving family, realizing it began with creating small moments of unity. While Emily excitedly explained the rules, Richard caught a sliver of their shared history with Karen, a bond resembling what could have been for him and Kelly. Just like that, he felt the weight begin to lift as laughter began to fill the space. Alright, how about we make this interesting? Let us split into teams. Karen suggested, seamlessly weaving herself into the fabric of their interaction. As the game unfolded, Richard observed Kelly engage with renewed energy. Somehow, Karen's lively presence seemed to dissolve the tensions and fears that had kept them at an emotional distance. His heart soared, sensing how each small moment knitted together, creating a tapestry of newfound possibility for their family. Look at us. We're a real team, Richard chuckled as Emily led a victory cheer, her laughter echoing through the room. In that moment, he realized how transformed he had become since the night of the gala. He had ventured into uncharted territory not just for himself but for his daughter and his relationship with Kelly. "Thank you for being here, Karen," he said earnestly, his gratefulness infused with confidence. "It's made a difference." "Anytime, Richard. You're doing an incredible job navigating this," Karen encouraged, affirming the growth he both intended and exhibited. Each affirmation unfurled another layer of doubt that had wrapped around his courage. As game night dwindled, and light-hearted conversations softened to whispers, Kelly approached Richard with a newfound trust glinting in her eyes. "Can we talk about what we discussed earlier?" "Of course," Richard replied, his heart steadying. They moved away from the distraction of giggles and excitement, venturing towards the solace of the quieter kitchen. "I realize I've let fear control too much of my life," she began, her voice earnest, stripped of bravado. "But I want Emily to see us as partners, not as adversaries." Richard felt a rush of sincerity wash over him. "I do too. I've been reflecting, and it's time for us to put aside our pride and really address what needs to be done for her." "Agreed. Let us set clear boundaries, responsibilities, and make room for honest conversations." As they spoke, Richard felt the connection between him and Kelly mend, pivoting from a relationship fraught with resentment into one built on mutual respect and commitment. "For Emily." "Yes, and let us incorporate regular check-ins, make it thinkable to discuss our progress," he suggested, feeling invigorated by the openness blooming between them. With every word exchanged, he could visualize obstacles fleeing, granting blossoming confidence to flourish where once fear had taken root. They were no longer tentative faces lost in the shadows, they were emerging fiercely, yet the real test lay ahead. The intention to nurture their dynamic would require practice amid the inevitable challenges they would face. Their past would always linger, a specter cast in every interaction they undertook. With Emily firmly anchoring their actions, Richard drove deep into his intention, prepared to face whatever the future might hold. Their shared laughter mingled with shared hope as they returned to the living room, a whirlwind of anticipation swirling in the air. In that moment, Richard recognized the beauty of moving forward not just for the sake of reconciliation but as part of an evolution where they could truly take flight. "For Emily," he murmured, a silent promise encapsulating the essence of what they had begun. The night drew to a close, yet Richard felt a steady pulse of resolve thrumming within him, a symphony of commitment that expanded beyond the confines of their home. Together with Kelly, united in purpose, he embraced the path ahead, aware that every moment of connection acted as a bridge shaping both their past and future, a new chapter unfolding, resolutely formed from the ashes of yesterday's constraints. As they prepared to call it a night, Richard turned back, feeling the unmistakable warmth that comes with choice. He not only had the chance to rewrite their story but an undeniable sense of achievement that grounded him. Their bond, though strained, now forged anew in shared commitment, love, and laughter. Now was the time to summon support, amplify their voice, and inspire others to embrace their journey toward healing and hope. Richard couldn't help but recall how simple it all seemed, how important it was to connect, to be vulnerable. "Together," he whispered, reaffirming his commitment aloud. And as their laughter echoed one last time before the night culminated, he knew true personal transformation was just beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. Your insights matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of backing the channel through these actions.